Welcome to Drone Channel, where I ripped off Pew News, but it's anime, so it's okay. I'm Dronable, and I'm Dronable but a lolly, and our first story comes in from the United Nations, who have proposed an initiative to ban lollies and other underage drawings and cartoons. The proposition is an initiative for state parties to tighten the restrictions of child exploitation and the spread of its content, which is all fine and good, but then we see that the material also extends to drawn and animated images, aka LOLI'S. So while it calls for prohibition of human trafficking and child prostitution, it also defines child pornography broadly, classifying anything that contains underage persons, whether real or fictional, as CP. So visual materials such as photographs, movies, drawings, and cartoons. The view of the committee is that simulated explicit sexual activities involving a person appearing to be a child in sexual conduct contribute to normalizing the sexualization of children and fuels the demand of child sexual abuse material. They also state that if you're a Chinese citizen on a Canadian or American boat with a stash of lolly porn, then you can be arrested, meaning this can affect you even if you don't reside in the countries that follow through with this. Japanese manga and hentai artists, who constantly get shit for their depictions of girls in their manga and doujins, are unsurprisingly heavily against this, complaining that the protocol will give non-existent youths the rights of real-life youths, similar to when the UN tried to get Japan to stop selling manga, anime, and hentai that contain sexual violence against female characters. Japan said that the anime industry employs many people, including females, so disrupting that business to protect people who aren't even real is absurd. Not to mention Reddit coming down hard on lolly/shota content, even ones based on anime that don't contain underage characters such as New Game. Now, as a grown adult male, I'm not supposed to give my own opinion, but as a lolly I can, so here's what I think. All of the worry and confusion can be attributed to the fact that the word lolly is extremely vague. If you hear two people say, "I love lollies," they can mean two wildly different things. Is lolly a character whose age is canonically under 18 despite their appearance, or is it based off their appearance alone? Both? Does the style of the character matter? What if the lolly obviously isn't based on a real person? What differentiates a lolly from a petite anime girl with small breasts? What about opie lollies? What about real legal women who happen to look childish? Who's the arbiter in all of this? In my opinion, I think realistic sketchings and drawings of real-life children are obviously under this category of illegal, but do anime children have this right? Does it really normalize the sexualization of real children? Well, it depends on the lolly and the person viewing them. Personally, as someone who happens to like small-breasted petite girls, it's troubling to think that my taste could get me arrested because someone else thinks that this anime girl is a child while I think they're just petite. At the end of the day, if someone gets arrested for looking at lollies, then who are they bringing justice to for doing so? The animated girls? Would this law really protect anyone or just hurt fans of Japanese artists and petite women? Now, the other side of the coin claims that lollies make people aroused towards real-life children and normalizes their sexualization, but I think that really depends on the person. If someone loves lolicon and is attracted to children, they'd be a pedophile regardless of lolicon. However, I'm not stating fact. This is quite obviously a gray area because nobody really knows the line here. There's no rules or guidelines for what animated body type is okay because everyone has a different opinion on that. After all, you constantly see artists online getting berated for drawing petite women and getting called pedophiles, while others defend them saying it's just a drawing and they look nothing like a child. That's the core of the issue. The word lolly and shota are just so undefined and opinionated that whether or not this is a lolly or isn't is dependent on the person viewing the lolly. Unless specific guidelines for art and what is allowed in terms of body type comes out along with this law, then it's just terrifying for everyone. Because even if you say you don't like lollies, someone else might disagree and get you arrested. Even if guidelines and rules do come out, will everyone agree on them? Is it okay to put laws on art? What they're trying to do is great, but they're going about it terribly. Of course, I think that the UN is focusing more on real-life child exploitation than fictional ones, but it's still a scary prospect to think about. Getting arrested despite nobody really being a victim? It's just such a complicated issue that I can't go into everything here, and I'm no expert on law, so tell me what you guys think in the comments. I genuinely want to know, and the viewer engagement doesn't hurt either. Our next story comes from Steam banning a game titled Rape Day. Now, for context, Valve has stated in the past that they'll allow anything on the Steam store as long as it follows the law or isn't straight up trolling. Well, the banning of Rape Day calls that statement into question as what they define as trolling. Just from hearing the title of the game, you can either be appalled at the game even being allowed on the store, or at Valve for removing someone's artistic creation. I admittedly was in the later group until I looked at the store page for the game. This isn't a hentai game or a visual novel telling a story while having a questionable name. It's shit. It looks like shit. The description in it is Rape Day is a game where you can rape and murder during a zombie apocalypse. Going by the developer's own description, that seems to be all the game is. Combined with like shitty 3D models, it seems like someone is just making a shocking game to cause controversy and get attention. There's even a baby killing scene, and the developers state themselves that it contains rape, necrophilia, incest, and quote, skip the foreplay and enjoy your rape day. You deserve it. Aside from that being pretty offensive to the average person, it really seems like it was made to be outrageous. No story, no engaging gameplay, just graphic scenes of rape and everything else you can think of. Valve essentially stated that this game being allowed on Steam would set a precedent for what can be allowed on the store, and could come with unforeseen consequences. In short, they see this as trolling. A game that is, quote, just trying to incite and sow discord. They've done the same removals in the past with AIDS Simulator and Active Shooter, which were shitty, low-effort bait troll games, and I agree. It seems like a shit game with the sole force behind it to cause controversy. Of course, I don't know this, and I'm not claiming to know the intentions behind the developers, but to put it simply, I don't think anyone who's actually seen the store page would miss it. This isn't the kind of content Steam wants to be known for hosting, and I don't blame them. It's shit. It's bait. It's made to make people mad. Now, if it was an actual game that wasn't just rape people, then I'd be fine with it. I want to make it clear that the subject matter of the game isn't why I'm against it. It's the downright terrible execution of it. There are plenty of hentai games revolving around rape and fetishes, but they're actual games. At the end of the day, it's the same problem as the last news. What constitutes as trolling is not well defined. Me and Valve think this is trolling, but there's people watching this video who don't think it's trolling, and there's no way to tell unless the developers come out and say, this is trolling. But when it comes to letting it on Valve's store, then the definition of trolling is up to Valve. A counter-argument is that if the game was named Murder Day, then no one would care, and I agree. But the fact that they chose to name it something so obviously outrageous to the general populace shows some intention of causing controversy. I'm not offended by the name myself, but if I wanted to piss people off, then I'd name my game Rape Day, or Abortion Simulator, or Drown the Babies, or Dark Souls 2 Remastered. Point is that in today's American culture, games where you kill are a lot less graphic to people than games where you sexually abuse. For example, Valve decided to let a game called Hatred on its store a long while back, and while the game was about a guy going on a murder spree, it was an actual game. At least according to Valve at the time, it wasn't called Murder All the Innocent People, and it seemed to have some artistic integrity and effort put into making an actual game, while this is just dog shit made for making people upset. So, I agree with Valve's decision because I agree what they define as trolling. But tell me what you guys think. Or don't. It's up to you. I'm a lolly, not a cop. Next, news comes from Catherine Full Body, or rather, a bunch of people who say it's transphobic. Small spoilers ahead, but for context, there's a scene of the main character in shock of finding out that a girl named Rin has a dick. It's a rather common trope in anime for a character to look like a girl while being a guy, and most people don't care. However, in the West, some people are obsessed with calling things phobic. In this case, transphobic, because the scene implies that Rin is a trans woman, and our main character reacts in a shocked way, implying it's a bad thing that she's trans. The only problem with this story is that Rin isn't trans. He's just a cross-dresser, and our main boy is just surprised at such a big revelation. So how it's transphobic when Rin isn't even trans is beyond me. Now, that's not all. There's another scene in the game where the main guy goes back in time to give everyone a better life, and this better life for one of the actual trans characters in the game involves her not transitioning. However, people leave out the fact that this scene takes place in the past, meaning it's actually just a time before she transitions, so again, it's not really transphobic. But that's not the point I want to discuss with this story. I don't know much about Catherine aside from research in this subject, but what I want to talk about is how similar this situation is to the poly controversy in Honey Pop 2. Now, this is a touchy subject, so I want to make sure I'm not misunderstood. Don't assume anything from what I say here. I like trans people. I'm just complaining about the people who find the mere idea of a trans character being in a piece of media transphobic. Obviously, this is a small vocal minority of people, and keep in mind that I'm only talking about these specific people, but they're a large enough group to actually pressure developers into changing their game for them. The same people who claim to fight for proper representation in media and want to defend trans rights are inadvertently making every developer terrified of putting trans characters in their games in the first place. If a character that isn't even trans is being lambasted, then why would anyone want to put trans characters in their game if there's such a high chance that they'll be called transphobic and have a potential PR disaster on their hands? It's just not worth it. It's the same thing with Polly. She simply existed as a trans character, and you had people on Twitter who don't even play HuniePop calling the game transphobic and problematic. You know what that leads to? Developers just removing all semblance of their transition in the first place. Catherine Full Body is changing a few lines in localization to adjust bigotry? And Polly is never to be referred to as trans again. The point is, people are getting rid of trans characters to appeal to an audience that doesn't even engage in the media that features the trans characters. It's an oxymoron where people want more trans representation, yet at the same time throw a fit whenever there's a mere possibility of a character being trans. To me, this shows that people are more interested in virtue signaling, being outraged, and that they don't actually care about whether or not they're right to do so. I love seeing trans characters in media, not because of tokenism, but because I tend to find trans characters interesting. You just don't see it that often, and it's refreshing when a character just happens to be trans because I personally like it. I think it can lend some depth to a character, and if an artist wants to make a character trans, then they should have every right to do so. But nobody does for this exact reason. And identity politics is hampering creative freedom in the West. People are scared to make a character trans or gay or whatever else in fear of making them be trans in the wrong way. Meanwhile, the only acceptable minority characters are ones devoid of individualism and are as non-offensive as humanly possible, where them being a minority is all the character they're allowed to have. Now, I realize that this isn't as big of an issue as I'm making it appear, but as someone who's a huge supporter in creative freedom, it's sad to see storytellers being told their characters are problematic for whatever reason people come up with. It's just a vocal minority on Twitter making people censor their creations to appeal to them, and it upsets me. I know me simply bringing up this issue has made a few people upset, and that's the problem. This isn't worth being controversial. People should be able to have their own characters and stories be whatever they want. Whether it's good or bad quality is up to them, but at the end of the day, that's their business, and I want people to be able to accept that and ignore something if they don't like it. Outrage culture has to stop, and this simple story is an example of why. That's it for Drone Channel today, and I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe I've given you something to think about. Tell me what you think about this show and format, because I might do it again someday. Lastly, please keep things civil in the comments if you're going to argue. You can be rude and name call if you really want to, but don't be stupid. I don't want my audience to be the equivalent of, well, pretty much everyone on Twitter. Now, if you excuse me, I have some lollies that need attending to. I'll see you next time, everybody.